Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com. The following program is a production of the Barroom Network. It is intended for all audiences.
Doug Buffon.
This defense sucks. This is moronic.
John Buffon.
If your best run plays are coming off end arounds, there's a problem.
Doug was behind the microphone first. He never held back.
Very difficult to score when your offense is on the bench. When your defense is out there giving up 70, 80, 70, 64-yard drives.
Now, it's his nephew, John, and there's no holding this Buffon back either.
An offensive-minded coach that's running an offense that got 9 yards and a half. A beaten-up defense that isn't necessarily performing in key situations.
I've had it. I have had it. I want somebody to get kicked in the ass.
How many games can you rattle off that involve the team running the ball 7 times and they win? I can't think of any.
I don't mind you getting beat. I got my ass whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me.
Because Bears fans wanted to believe in the worst way that Chicago had a stable, competitive franchise. And this is what we got.
It's Buffon 55, the John Buffon Show.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Buffon 55, a fast-paced approach at breaking down the Chicago Bears. I'm John Buffon, and before we begin, I'd like to wish my co-host and producer, Alyssa Barbieri, the very best as she's dealing with a family emergency tonight. But filling in for her tonight is Aldo Gandia. Aldo, you haven't been a co-host on this show for quite some time. I hope you remember how to do it.
I think I do, but yeah, this is the 5th season of Buffon 55, and I think I was the co-host in season 1, and then after that, you kicked me away, kicked me out of the team, and I'm back for at least one show.
You just keep coming back. We just can't get rid of you, but we're going to see if you can remember how to do this. We do have a great guest lined up to help us better understand the Bears' upcoming opponent, the Cleveland Browns. But just in case this is someone's first time listening to the show, Aldo, can you explain how this all goes down?
Absolutely. Buffon 55 has 3 segments. We start by learning about the Bears' upcoming opponent from someone who follows them closely and reports on them. And today we have Jared Mueller from Bears Wire. Then that's followed by our B55 segment. That's when I ask John 5 questions and his responses must be completed within 55 seconds. That's his way of honoring Doug Buffon, who wore number 55 for 15 seasons with the Chicago Bears. We then finish things up by going into Buffon's basement, and that's where John and I, unfortunately, Alyssa's not with us, wishing you the best, Alyssa. John and I will sort of have a roundtable discussion and entertain thoughts from the chat room. So that's it, John. It's all yours.
That's right. Thank you, Aldo. And like you said, our guest tonight is Jared Mueller from Browns Wire. He's here to give us the rundown of the Bears' Week 3 opponent. Jared, how you doing? Appreciate you being on.
Hey, not a problem. Appreciate being with you. I'm doing all right and enjoying a freezing cold comparable to the 90 degrees we had like 5 days ago. So Ohio weather, you never know what's going to happen.
It only gets worse from here. So we are hunkering down for that winter that's ultimately coming. But something that could seem a little warmer is the outlook for the Cleveland Browns. Much wish we could say that for Bears fans. But the Browns are currently 1-1 through these first 2 weeks. And, they had that close loss to the Chiefs where it looks like they really could make a splash onto the scene, but just came up short. What is your early season evaluation of this team? Are the aspirations as high as some think they are?
They absolutely are. The Browns believe that they are capable of competing for an AFC championship and competing in the Super Bowl. And so far, their game against the Chiefs, they played up to their competition. They really controlled that game. Unfortunately, a few things here and there, and those few things are called Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce, kind of got in the way of that process. But in the end, that game showed that the Browns were capable of competing and really controlling the Chiefs for a long period of time. Really, I call it a YOLO ball. Patrick Mahomes just threw the ball up in the air. Tyreek Hill made a play, 75-yard touchdown. All of a sudden, they're back in the game. Without that play, I don't think the Browns lose that game. And then they played down to the Texans in week 2. Tyrod Taylor and about 12 other former Browns, I'm over-exaggerating just by a couple, on Houston, really wanted some payback. Thankfully for the Browns, Taylor gets hurt, doesn't play in the second half of the game, and the Browns are able to take control. And a game they really didn't look great in. They still had a 10-point victory, and they really believe that as the team gets healthy and as the team comes together, it is going to look really special in the second half of the season. They barely played any of their defenders in preseason, and the defense has been bad. It just really has, especially on third down, especially against mobile quarterbacks. And welcome in Mr. Justin Fields.
I was just going to say, what a week for the Bears to install a mobile quarterback as their starter. But speaking of quarterbacks and staying healthy, I did want to ask you about Baker Mayfield. Had a little bit of a shoulder scare in the last game. Appears to be okay. A two-part question here. How do you think he's going to be able to react to that this week against the Bears? And moving forward, what are the long-term plans for Baker Mayfield? Because there's a lot of talk about, is this your franchise guy? What kind of contract is Baker Mayfield going to command when it's time for an extension? So what are the long-term plans with Baker Mayfield? But first, what can we expect this week?
You know, Baker Mayfield was a full participant in practice today, despite that shoulder that he hurt, making a tackle after an interception. Bears fans, don't get too excited. His rookie wide receiver stopped on the play. It was not a bad throw by Baker Mayfield, so don't get too excited. But the reality is that Baker Mayfield is the franchise quarterback. He's completing over 80% of his passes this year. And he's not just dinking and dunking. The Browns are very aggressive down the field. 15, 20, and 30 yards down the field. And that's without Odell Beckham Jr., who may return this week. So he has been aggressive and accurate. It is pinpoint accuracy. It's been really fun to watch this year. Last year was the first year he was ever under center. It's the first year in the NFL that he's had the same offensive coordinator 2 years in a row and head coach 2 years in a row. He looks in total control of this offense. The question of his future is when, not if. It really is about trying to figure out what makes sense for both sides. For Mayfield, he's betting on himself. He always has, right? He walked on at Texas Tech, Oklahoma. Like, he is going to bet on himself. And at this point in time, if things continue, you're talking about Josh Allen numbers or somewhere in that range. Unlikely you get to the Patrick Mahomes numbers. But you never know with the NFL. They've got another year after this on his fifth-year option. But it's a when, not if, barring, obviously, like anything catastrophic. Then maybe we're going to have some issues.
And it all depends on how that market sets itself up for Baker Mayfield. Could be a big cash-in day for him coming up down the line. Now, you mentioned Odell Beckham Jr., who might be able to make his debut this week. Jarvis Landry won't be on the field. He got put on IR. So let's assume that OBJ can play. Will he be at full strength? And if he can't play, who should the Bears be expecting who should the Bears cornerbacks be expecting to be guarding come the game time?
You know, it's really interesting. With Jarvis Landry out, the Browns lose some consistency and gain some explosiveness. And so you see some of the names on that list. OBJ probably will be on a pitch count, mostly because they want to be cautious with some soft tissue injuries and those kind of things. But he's been ready since week 1. They were going to be really, really cautious with him. Donovan Peoples-Jones was the star of training camp. He was catching everything. He's a big, fast receiver. Anthony Schwartz is literally an Olympic speed guy. And so those are guys that they're going to have to deal with that are downright explosive. Kevin Stefanski really worked on making plays for Schwartz in week 1, and he caught the ball, and he was if he didn't juggle one, he was scoring 6 points. Rashard Higgins is really the guy that will replace Jarvis Landry. He's not someone who's going to wow you. He's going to be the guy that's in the right place at the right time. And with all the other weapons at the wide receiver position, he's the guy that becomes open because the third and fourth cornerback, just aren't as good as the rest of the guys. But he's just not going to wow you with anything.
And is this a possibility with Jarvis Landry out that they could utilize some of those tight ends a little bit more? Maybe Austin Hooper gets more involved. Perhaps Njoku steps in and has more usage. Any chance that the tight ends could have a big game against Chicago?
They really could. The Browns and Kevin Stefanski used the tight ends very often. Last year, they had the most 2 and 3 tight end sets in the NFL. So they are on the field a lot, but a lot of times that is a setup because their run and pass plays look almost identical. If I was better at breaking up film, I could show you play after play where it looks exactly like a run, but it was a pass. And then it looks exactly like that same pass and became a run. So you'll see those three, Harrison Bryant, Austin Hooper, David Njoku on the field a lot. Njoku has worked really, really hard on his hands. He's been inconsistent, but he's the best athlete of the three. Hooper was a little limited last year. He got a little spring in his step this year that he didn't have in 2020 as at the time the highest paid tight end in the NFL. So you'll see a lot of them, but with all the weapons, and then we haven't even talked about the run game yet, which I know we will. You're unlikely to see a guy with 8, 9, 10 receptions. You're going to see a lot of guys with 3, 4, and 5. And so the defense doesn't know who really to hone in on. And there are times where Njoku and Hooper are going to be out wide, and you're going to have 2 really fast wide receivers on the inside of them in a 3-by-1 set. There's just lots of ways that Kevin Stefanski schemes things up to make things difficult on a defense.
That must be nice to have the way you scheme to your players' strengths. But that's neither here nor there. That's for a different podcast. You mentioned the run game, and we're going to talk about that right now. Some surprising usage for Nick Chubb last week. I believe only 11 carries. Now, was that part of game scheme or was that part of injury? Because Kareem Hunt did have 13 carries. Is that maybe how they're going to break it up as the season progresses to try to keep some legs fresh? Or what can we maybe expect out of the Browns' run game this week?
Yeah, they're absolutely going to continue to keep the legs fresh as much as possible. Nick Chubb is clearly their number one back. Who gets a couple more carries? They don't really care. Chubb got paid, so he really doesn't care. The Browns also extended both of those players over the last couple of years, so they're really looking at making sure that these guys are healthy for the long run. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Dearness Johnson, not Demetric Felton, gets some carries here coming up soon. They also are treating they treat the Texans like they should have treated the Texans, a game they should win. And so they weren't going to ride Nick Chubb. They were going to ride Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and everybody else. But in bigger games, not against the Bears probably, you may see a 18, 19, 20 carry game for Nick Chubb in the future. But I don't expect to see that in week 3. You might see a few more carries for him, a few less for Hunt, and going to see Dearness Johnson there in the backfield as well.
Now, the Bears are hoping to get Eddie Goldman back to their defensive line this week, so they are really hoping to get a big push up front. Can you help us understand this Browns offensive line a little bit better? Are there any weaknesses among this line that the Bears can try to exploit, whether it be from Khalil Mack or Robert Quinn, who looks like he's decided to play in 2021, or anyone anywhere up the A-gap?
Yeah, so I would say this. When healthy, that is the best offensive line in the NFL, period. Across the board. Last year, Jedrick Wills was the weak link, and he was good. The problem is injury. So today, 4 of the 5 starting Browns offensive linemen either didn't play or were limited in practice. So you're really going to look at, can the Bears take advantage of that, specifically at left tackle. Jedrick Wills went out in week 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs. His backup, Chris Hubbard, hurt his tricep the following week. Hubbard was out last week. Jedrick Wills played about 2/3 of the game and then went out because his ankle was bothering him. If he's not available, and Hubbard is still not available, which I don't expect, you're looking at either James Hudson, unlikely, the rookie 4th-round pick out of UC Cincinnati, or you're going to some guy named Blake Hance, who the Browns picked up late last year, and he was forced into the game. And the reason we say some guy named Blake, that's literally what Baker Mayfield knew about him before he got into the huddle. He said, yeah, some guy named Blake was blocking for me. So left tackle is really going to be a big concern. Jack Conklin has been a little limited this year with injury. He just doesn't seem himself. So it's really going to be on the outside, Khalil Mack and Quinn rushing the passer. The interior, Joel Bitonio, J.C. Treader, Wyatt Teller. Listen, they're going to put in work. They run a lot of power, some gap, duo, along with the wide zone scheme. And so the interior defensive line never knows what's coming their way. Are they going to be getting run to the sideline, or are they going to be getting run over?
So it sounds like the Bears are going to have success. They're going to have to pinch the edges a little bit, may not have too much success on the interior part of that line. I want to switch sides of the ball now because I find the Browns defense very interesting. They came in with really, really high expectations this year. And so far, maybe I read them wrong, but it just seems a little inconsistent at times. and I say that in a very diplomatic way. So what would you say would be the issue with the Browns defense? Because there is a ton of talent on that side of the ball. What has been going wrong for them?
Everything. I mean, just bluntly, the Browns defense has struggled in so many ways. Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, Tack McKinley, between them, 1 sack. Grant Delpit and Joe Jackson, who's played 18 snaps, each have a sack themselves. So they're not getting pressure. The linebackers have struggled with some injuries, but they can't cover much of anybody at this point in time. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is fast as a rookie, but he's got a lot to learn. And then the coverage has just been a big struggle. And so the Kansas City Chiefs picked on Denzel Ward, the number 4 overall pick, who is also looking for a contract extension, Pro Bowler, all of those kind of things. They picked on him in week 1. And then, Troy Hill has looked okay coming over from LA. Greg Newsome II has probably looked like the Browns' best cornerback. And that's not saying a lot for a rookie. He is a first-round pick. It's great to see, but he shouldn't be their number 1 cornerback, but he's playing like the best cornerback. And then, Ronnie Harrison got kicked out of the first game, shoving a Chiefs coach. John Johnson III just hasn't looked like the dynamic player they saw out in LA. And Grant Delpit returned last week. He looked really good, but he's going to be slowly integrated back into the defense coming off an Achilles injury. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of names. The interior of the defensive line, Malik McDowell went from being a second-round pick, never played in the NFL. All of a sudden, he's back. And so they have just struggled over and over and over again in different areas in the NFL, or, on the defensive side of the ball, that you wonder is it because they didn't play in the preseason, or is it a bunch of talented players that the defensive coordinator is not using properly? We don't know yet. We're only 2 weeks in, but so far it's been a real struggle. And I'm not sure if Joe Woods' seat is going to get hot, but I definitely know fans are absolutely blaming him primarily because there's a lot of talented names on that defense.
You mentioned maybe the linebackers are having a hard time covering. Now, the Bears would love, now at least Bears fans, whether their head coach does or not is yet to be determined, but the Bears fans would love to see their tight end, high draft pick Cole Kmet, get started. So far, 6 catches, Jimmy Graham 1 catch. So they have not been utilizing the tight end at all. And so is this an opportunity with the way that the Browns backers and maybe safeties have been playing to maybe get that tight end jump started a little bit?
I'm not sure if I remember a Browns defense stopping a tight end, period. I mean, in my lifetime, and I'm one of the old heads in the sports media world at some level, I don't remember the Browns stopping a tight end. Now, they have some talent there, but I think Cole Kmet could make an impact. Fields, from my memory as a Buckeye fan, didn't use the tight ends a ton at Ohio State, but that's more of a Ryan Day issue than it was a Fields issue. But where his comfort seems to be is on the deep balls on the outside, and then over the middle, it's more of those kind of post plays, those kind of things. So it'll be interesting to see if Fields can take advantage of the fact that the Browns are probably going to be starting Malcolm Smith. And Mac Wilson hasn't covered a tight end since he's been in the NFL. And Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is just undersized. So he's a big hitter, and he's really, really fast. It's just not there for the Browns linebackers at this point in time.
Now, because Justin Fields is getting his first start, one would think that the Bears might rely on their stud of a running back in David Montgomery. If that's the case, and once again, this is all up to the head coach, if that is the case, will there be opportunities for David Montgomery to run on the Browns defense? How has the Browns run defense looked so far this season?
It's been a little hit or miss. Kansas City doesn't like to run the ball, and so that against Kansas City, they didn't even really try to. I think against the Bears, we're going to see a lot more of Andrew Billings. He is just a big, beefy boy, a big, strong boy in the middle of the defensive line. And so the Texans really didn't try. I mean, they were able to run the ball, but they really tried to throw the ball to win or use Tyrod Taylor's legs to really make an impact. So I think Montgomery can be successful. But looking at some of the information just from their first two games, the Bears don't seem to have an explosive offense. The Browns seem to be okay with giving up 10-play drives, 9 minutes, and just believe that their offense is going to score enough that it doesn't really matter. And it really feels like that's how the Bears want to play as well. So, so it'll be really interesting to see how boring this game could get if it's, the Bears getting 3 and 4 yards every single play, maybe every once in a while, a deep ball to Mooney or one of those guys. But I think the run game can be successful against the Browns, mostly because I think they're inviting it. Smaller linebackers, smaller defensive line, especially on the interior outside of Billings. I think the Browns really do invite other teams to run the ball, believing they can be a better running team and they're more explosive on offense.
Yeah, you just stole the playbook, man, because it is nickel and dime the whole way down the field. I don't think they didn't attempt anything past 10 yards in the first game, and now you're not really sure what they're going to do with Justin Fields, if they're going to unleash him or if they're going to rein him in. And they would love to have a 15-play, 70-yard drive, take up 10 minutes and kick a field goal. So if that's what they're inviting, that's what they're going to get, because that seems to be the playbook so far. You did talk about the secondary a little bit. If they decide to take some shots down the field, whether it be to Darnell Mooney or Allen Robinson, or they do have speed in Marquise Goodwin and Damiere Byrd, how have the corners looked as far as guarding the big plays? Now, it's hard to really gauge things against the Chiefs sometimes, so you can't base it on that. But how have they looked against some of those big shot plays?
They're a little bit of a smaller cornerback group. Denzel, Troy Hill, Greg Newsome's got a little size to him. Listen, they're a little physical. They're a little grabby. Ward and Newsome were both trained in face guarding in college, so not getting their head around those kind of things. I think they're going to probably bite on some double moves. And then when you look at the secondary or you look at the safety room, they got 3 guys who none of them are really free safeties, but they're good in coverage. But none of them are true kind of that free safety, the Eddie Jackson, those kind of players. And I'm not even confident he's better free safety than they would be, but they're good at both. So they just don't have kind of that guy who's going to be deep center field. They have guys who can play, but with the speed that you're talking about, I think Fields can take advantage of that. The real question is, can the Browns get any kind of pressure against what seems like a little bit of a weakness in the Bears with that offensive line?
It's a ragtag bunch, but they're gritty. They do their best. they played a hell of a lot better last week than they did in the first week. So much like everything else with the Bears organization, you never know what you're going to get. They're up and then they're down. But before I kick you over to Aldo, I wanted to, because we always kind of get a kick out of talking special teams, all puns intended. Is there anyone to spotlight on the Browns special team unit, whether it be a kicker, a punter, a returner, a gunner, long snapper, anybody that the Bears should be looking at as far as, hey, this guy could have some sort of impact on this game?
I get excited about special teams as well, knowing that I have no confidence in my own ability to analyze it, but I can see it. So Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah has been a freaking missile in coverage. I mean, he is hitting people. The Browns' plan is to kick the ball to the 1-yard line, believing they're going to stop the return before the 25. So you're very rarely going to see them kick it into the end zone on purpose. Demetric Felton is their return guy. He was electric last week, both catching the pass as well as returning the ball. And then just a weird one, Jamie Gillen, who may have cost the Browns the Chiefs game with his muff punt, is a rugby player. They haven't done it yet, but he has the physical capability, speed, athleticism to take a fake punt and run a guy or two over. I mean, he's a big boy. He's got some strength. He's got some speed. So if you see a fake punt, you can say you heard it here first on this podcast, on this video podcast tonight.
Absolutely. We're going to take all credit for that too.
Absolutely.
Before we let Jared go, what do you got for him?
Sure. A lot of talk in the chat room about Jarvis Landry and what his absence is going to mean to the Cleveland Browns. Some of the folks in the chat have kind of described them as the heart and soul of this offense. You agree with that assessment? And tell us what his absence is going to mean to the Browns.
So absolutely. Jarvis Landry has been the heart and soul of the team since he arrived. The famous speech on Hard Knocks is, if the meat ain't falling off the bone, I'm paraphrasing, you better be out there playing. He is a leader. His relationship with Odell, best friends, all that kind of stuff. And Baker Mayfield's really important. What I think you're going to see is Kevin Stefanski has a lot of plays. I call them just get the first down plays. I don't have any fancy other term for that. If it is 3rd and 2, Jarvis Landry runs a 3-yard route as crisp as possible. And it's very clear that he's going to get the ball. It's going to be for 3 yards. He's not going to get a lot of yak afterwards. And that's kind of what it's going to look like. So what's going to be interesting to see is what do they do? Because it was very clear. I could just watch, be like, yeah, Jarvis Landry's going to do this. They're going to get a first down, and then they'll figure out the rest later. Does Stefanski continue to do that? Does he get more aggressive because he's got a more electric set of wide receivers with Landry out? But Landry is not a guy that lets things go, and he is expected to be on the sideline yelling at his teammates the entire game.
You got some pushback in the chat room when you made the proclamation that the Browns offensive line was the best in the NFL. I quickly went to the stats and saw that they've allowed 2 sacks this season, which puts them at the middle of the pack. And then last season, they were in the top 5 in terms of sacks allowed. They were in terms of the top 5 being among the best. So anything else you want to tell the naysayers about the Browns offensive line to back up your claim that they're among the best, maybe the best offensive line in football?
I trust people smarter than me. Brian Baldy, he has dubbed them the Union for a reason. The way they work together is ridiculous. Even there's a play, it's up on the Browns Wire from week 1 where Wyatt Teller was beat on a spin move. He did a spin move and stopped the defender. Like, they just are so athletic. And to be honest, Bill Callahan is, again, the best offensive line coach in the NFL, has been from all of his time with the Shanahans. It's not because he's on the Browns. I could care less. I will tell you how terrible the Browns are on defense. That offensive line and that offense is legit. And so I've watched enough offensive lines to say, listen, you can't grade it unless you're Pro Football Focus. I believe they're the best in the league if they're not top 3.
Now, I am headed over to First Energy Field for the first time. So what should I expect out of that venue?
So you need to look up Muni Lot for municipal lots. And you just need to go down there and just enjoy it. It'll be lakefront. So depending on where you're at, to be honest with you, you might be in the shade freezing and about a half hour later, sunburnt. So just be prepared because it switches up on you. And so, yeah, get down there. There's some great food in Cleveland, a lot of great tailgating, and really friendly people. As long as you're not a jerk, they're good with you. And so we're used to being downtrodden. So we can kind of relate to Chicago Bears fans. My big brother is one. I can relate to him. I haven't figured out what our bet's going to be yet, but we're going to have something on it.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my last question. Care to make a prediction on the game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be ugly. I think it's most likely going to be a game where the Bears feel like they're in it and the Browns seem like they're sleepwalking for a little while. Maybe the Browns get an early score, and so I'm looking at a game, probably the more I've looked at the numbers, 21-17, something like that. The Browns get the victory. I think it's very clear the Browns are more talented. I think Justin Fields is scary. Like Justin Fields in the open field, he's not actually the runner, at least at Ohio State. He's just elusive and he can run. He's not Lamar Jackson, but the guy is electric, and his arm and his accuracy is ridiculous. Then again, Matt Nagy doesn't know how to use a quarterback to his strengths, so I don't know what they're going to do.
No argument there, right, John?
I was going to say, you're not going to get any pushback on this podcast about that. But I will back up Jared's notion there are friendly people in Cleveland. I went to a Bears-Browns preseason game a couple years ago, had my Bears gear on, and everyone was actually pretty cordial. I'll be honest. I was very impressed. I didn't know what to expect. Everyone was really cool. I think, game recognizes game, and so we were there, and it was a good time. So, Jared, before we cut you loose, I'd love for you to tell our listeners where they can find your work, where they can interact with you, because you do great work over there. We want to make sure people are aware of it.
Sure, absolutely. So Browns Wire, we're a part of USA Today's Wire network of all the Cleveland teams, of all the NFL teams and all the other things that we cover. Come to me on Twitter. I see that I might be a little arrogant. I apologize for that. Listen, I haven't had a Browns team that's been quality almost in my lifetime back in the 90s. But at Jared K. Mueller, JaredKMueller, Browns Wire on Facebook. Check us out over there. Come communicate. Let's talk about it. I have no problem doing that.
Jared Mueller, part of Browns Wire over at USA Today Network. We appreciate you, Jared. We're going to talk to you down the road when the Bears play the Browns in the Super Bowl.
Sounds good. I'll see you in 10 years.
All right, take care. We'll be back with more Buffone 55 right after this.
The Barroom Network presents two fired-up Bears fans. They are ready to rumble on the Bear Debate.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. We are headed to my favorite segment of the show. That's where I ask John Buffone 5 questions, and he has 55 seconds to respond to each question. And that, of course, is in honor of his uncle, Doug Buffone, who wore number 55 for 15 seasons with the Chicago Bears. And I can say that I saw a lot of those games. So, John, are you ready to rumble, as the boxing announcer would say?
I am ready. Let's do this.
All right. Well, let me move you over here first for the video purpose. And I'll say Justin Fields was put in the game after Andy Dalton suffered a bone bruise that was learned and that we learned could take now 2 to 4 weeks to recover. At Monday's presser, head coach Matt Nagy said he wouldn't comment on if he'd start Dalton even if he was healthy because of a scheme issue. Now, and then a PR rep later showed up, told the media that Andy Dalton would be the starter if he was healthy. John, what do you make of all this stuff with the Bears? Your 50 seconds start now. 55.
Look, I'm happy that Justin Fields is a starter, but I found it a bit tiresome that now Matt Nagy was going to be cryptic about the starting quarterback. Now he wanted to play mental games with the opponents. Where was this back in May when Andy Dalton was obviously going to be your starting quarterback for months leading up into the season? There weren't any Jedi mind tricks in the summer when you did nothing but beat the Andy Dalton drum. So I'm not happy that Andy Dalton got hurt. I don't want to get that twisted. He played as well as he could, and he was playing well up until that injury. But the Justin Fields era starts right now. This kid gives the Bears the best chance to compete with good teams because of the explosive plays he can provide. There is an electricity with Justin Fields. The players feel it. The fans feel it. The head coach better damn well feel it. But overall, Matt Nagy's probably pissed because Justin Fields is starting out of necessity and not when he decided he was ready. He can't show off how smart he was because he put Justin Fields in at just the right time.
It is incredible, the electricity that Justin Fields provides. Peters, the left tackle, was asked about what his thoughts on Justin Fields, and he said the guy is just so confident. He comes into the huddle, he calls the play with the utmost confidence, and he makes plays. And so that's just based on practice with the scout team and all that. It's going to be interesting to see how he does in real game live action on Sunday. How excited are you that Justin Fields is going to be the quarterback Sunday?
Well, much more excited than I would have been if Andy Dalton was a starting quarterback against the Cleveland Browns. And once again, I hope Andy Dalton gets better very quickly. I don't want anyone to be hurt. But the fact of the matter is you got your very explosive rookie quarterback in there getting his first start against a good team. And there's a lot on the line here. If the Bears go out and win, that's a huge win. Nobody would chalk this up as a win before the season. Nobody has this in the win column. But now you got Justin Fields in there. You got a big X factor in there. Not too much tape on Justin Fields is out there, and he can make things happen off script. And he might have to do that a couple times this game, depending on how that line holds up. So he can make the unscripted plays. He can make things happen with his legs. So there's always that sense of the unknown in the sense that he can do something really special on any snap. So I'm really excited to see this.
Well, let's get to question number 2. While he was in the game on Sunday, he just went 6 for 13 for 60 yards and threw an interception, had a fumble, and got multiple false start penalties. But he showed off his escapability, his arm strength. The reviews on Fields were mixed amongst the national media. What say you, John Buffon? You got 55 takes.
Well, I say Justin Fields got thrown into a game without taking first-team reps throughout the week. The guy was running the scout team all week and got tossed into a game plan that was crafted for Andy Dalton. So did we see rookie mistakes? Absolutely. I'm pretty sure some of those are going to happen, whether it's week 2 or week 8 or whenever they decide to put him in. Those mistakes were probably going to happen. We never expected Justin Fields to play mistake-free football. Hell, Zach Wilson threw 4 picks last week. I think Trevor Lawrence threw 3. Let him work through it. We also saw some of that excitement that Justin Fields brings to a team. We saw the scrambling. We saw the arm strength. We saw the placement on some of those balls, like the one that should have been caught by Allen Robinson in the end zone, and another one that went off of Darnell Mooney's fingertips. So we saw what Justin Fields can bring to the table, and I don't care if you're only looking at box scores, then yeah, you probably already have an opinion. But this is the future. Let's light this firecracker. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Now, we're going to play after our commercial break. We're going to play some of Justin Fields' comments from the press conference today. But one of the things that was just striking is that he's just there. He's so confident. He's so stoic. He says, I believe I belong here. And that kind of confidence, I mean, we see that in every quarterback. But coming from him, it's a slightly more special. And the players, when they talk about him, they are just totally convinced that this guy is going to be a superstar in this league. Isn't that cool?
It is. And when he was describing what happened on that interception he threw, it wasn't just like, well, I need to play better and I got to go back and look at it. And, our coaches are going to be, it's going to be a team effort and I just got to get better every day. He broke down exactly what he did. He knew exactly what he did wrong. And he broke down the coverage. He said what he was looking at. And he said why he threw that interception. I've said this before, but Justin Fields seems like the kind of guy where he makes a mistake and he corrects it, and it rarely happens again. So I think that was a learning experience, and that's why you don't see him get frazzled or you don't see him get too high and too low. He just keeps processing all this information, and he's able to move forward from it. That's really, really encouraging.
Yeah. All right. I noticed that you asked our guest a question about regarding the linebackers in reference to our tight end position. And I know why. It's because you're not happy that Cole Kmet only caught one ball and Jimmy Graham had 0. So do these recent struggles from the tight end group reflect more on the players or the coaches? 55 seconds, go.
Do you guys remember 2 years ago when the narrative was that Matt Nagy's offense wasn't working because it was centered around the tight end, and because of injuries, the Bears were stuck with the likes of Ben Broniker and Bradley Soule and Jesper Horsted and J.P. Holtz? Well, they used their top draft pick in 2020 to bring in Cole Kmet, and they retained Jimmy Graham, and they signed Jesse James, who is a competent pass catcher. So who's left to blame? All we heard about last year was how Cole Kmet had to get more involved, and he was picking up the game plans so quickly for a rookie. Then why even use that high of a draft pick on a tight end if you aren't going to feature him from time to time? In fact, why are you carrying 5 tight ends? Jimmy Graham, Jesse James, Jesper Horsted, they all kind of have the same game. So far this year, Cole Kmet has 6 catches. Jimmy Graham, 1. 0 touchdowns. That's your tight end production so far in 2021. It can't all be on the players.
Yeah, there's no doubt that some of the scheming, some of the play calling is responsible for this. But I will say this, we've been complaining that David Montgomery hasn't gotten 20 carries. Well, he finally got 20 carries. And so there's only one football to go around. And so the key is there's going to be some weeks where some players are going to be featured more than others. And it all depends on what the defense gives you. What are the defense's strengths? What are their weaknesses? And so there may be some weeks where David Montgomery is only going to touch the ball 10, 15 times because of the other defense's strengths, and that the tight ends are going to only get 5 targets or less in a game. So that could be part of the reason. There's only one football, and in both games, the Chicago Bears did win the time of possession, so they got more plays off than the opposition.
Yeah, well, time of possession is great, but if you have a 10 and 11 play drive that don't result in any points, I don't give a crap how long you held the ball. But I feel this strongly about the tight ends because although how many times last year during press conferences did we say, well, we got to find a way to get Cole Kmet more involved. We got to find a way to get him more. He's picking up the playbook. And Matt Nagy almost forgetting that he's the head coach saying, there's Jimmy Graham, but Cole Kmet needs to get more attention. As if he doesn't have control over that, as if he's just the coordinator and he has no control over whether Cole Kmet gets more involved. So that's why I'm a little upset about this, because now we're on year 2 and you spent a really high draft pick on a tight end. You would think that you would be working him into the game plan a little bit more.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens in Cleveland. Now, question number 4. After their week 1 performance, it was easy to write off the Bears defense. I think a lot of us did. But they stormed back against the Bengals, causing 4 turnovers and getting more pressure on the quarterback. And I've seen it in a while. What was the most surprising thing for you that you saw out of the Bears D in week 2? The clock starts when you do, buddy.
Well, I loved it, and they certainly turned back the clock. Eddie Jackson got some of his groove back. Jalen Johnson and Roquan Smith looked like absolute studs out there. I will say I was surprised with Robert Quinn, who, because of a stat correction today, is now being credited with 2 sacks against the Bengals. So he already has eclipsed his 2020 sack total in week 2. So the presence of a pass rush and the pressure applied by the defensive front was so refreshing. They were storming the A-gap, coming off the edge, deflecting passes, causing turnovers, defensive touchdowns. It felt like it was a Bears defense again. It felt awesome. And after such a sloppy performance in week 1, Sean Desai either did some soul searching or he watched every second of that game in slow motion to understand what needed to be addressed. Now, if they get Eddie Goldman back, maybe we see this defense really pick up some momentum and they get some of that 2018, 2019 swagger back. I'm trending towards the excitement level with the defense a little bit.
Yeah, I am too. I got to tell you that against the Bengals, going into that game, I had told people that the Bengals, their offensive line was having issues in week 1, that there were some communication issues. And so I anticipated this was going to be a great test for the Chicago Bears defensive line to prove that they can play well against a suspect defensive line. Well, we learned today from our guest, Jared, that could be facing the best offensive line in football. Arrogant.
This will be the barometer. This will be the barometer to figure out. Yeah, because if it's either the Bengals are really, really bad or the Bears are starting to trend upwards, and if they play well against the Browns line, then they should start gaining more believers.
Yep. All right. We'll talk more about that in the next segment. Now, last question. The Bears notched their first win of the 2021 season in a game we thought that they had the potential to lose. Let's admit it. A lot of people said it. I think we all mentioned it last week. Even though the Bears were victorious, many were still irritated by the way the Bears nearly blew a 20-3 lead in the fourth quarter. I know we criticize the Bears a lot on this show, but why do you think there was still some disappointment after the win? I'm turning off the clock. It's all yours.
Look, I find myself in this exact situation many times. I want this team to be successful. I want this team to win, and I want them to be a consistent, dominant force in the NFL. What I think I run into, and I think what a lot of fans run into, is we get frustrated with this team because of its consistent inconsistency. For the last 2 to 3 years, this team has been in a constant identity crisis and performs differently, not just week to week, but sometimes quarter to quarter, as we saw last week. So what is the Bears' calling card on offense? It should be running the ball with their stud running back, but that's not what you think about when you think about the current Chicago Bears. And honestly, what do you think about when you think about the current Chicago Bears? Nothing really on offense comes to mind. You might think about a defense that used to be dominant and is now trying to regain some of that swagger. But we saw a 17-point fourth quarter lead almost bungled away to the Bengals. And how many great teams are going to cause 4 turnovers and they still need a big first down to ice the game at the end? So I think we are frustrated because we see flashes of what this team could be. We see potential superstars across the roster, yet our expectations are still incredibly modest. Perhaps this is just a way to protect our hearts from emotional pain. Maybe this is just one big defense mechanism that we use. But maybe when there is a consistent product on the field, we'll lower our shields again. We'll be back with Buffone's Basement right after this.
Baseball at the Barroom. On Monday nights, get ready for the Friendly Confines Extra Innings. It's 30 minutes, it's clever, it's concise, and it's all Cubs coverage. That's followed by a killer White Sox show, South Burbs Hitmen. Then on Thursday afternoon, it's Cubs and Sox opinions and analysis with Crosstown Crosstalk. Baseball at the Barroom. Join us live and or on demand.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. It's now time for Buffone's Basement. Aldo and I are just going to, shoot the breeze, bringing up all these different topics, some casual Bears talk. There's a lot to go down. So, Aldo, are you ready just to kind of get this going?
I am dying to talk Bears football with you, and also people in the chat have questions. In fact, can we get to this one first? 4,000
Sure.
overs. says, I want to know if John's uncle ever commented on Dick Butkus and what it was like to play alongside number 51.
Well, I tell this story a lot. First of all, we always said Butkus was a madman. But one of my favorite stories that he would tell was, I guess back in the olden days, and I use that term loosely, is you weren't required to have your picture taken for football cards. So whenever the photographer would come around and say, okay, it's picture day, we're taking these for your football cards for either the 1971 and so on season. So they'd call all the guys out to get their picture taken for the football cards. And he said he and Dick Butkus would consistently hide in the corner of the locker room in the showers so no one could find them, so they didn't have to get their picture taken for the cards. So if you're a card collector, there's going to be some sporadic years where there are no Doug Buffon cards because he wouldn't go and get his picture taken because he just did not want to do it. He did not want to have to wait in line. He didn't have to do all these stupid poses. If you look at some of his poses for his cards, he's there. He's looking all pissed off. His arms are up like this, and he's just really so. That's one of my favorite stories that he would he's like, I just want to play football. I don't want to have my picture taken for a football card. I don't need all this extra BS. I can't imagine him playing in today's age where he'd have to do all this extra bull crap and be on social media and do all this media availability and do the promos and have to say his name for Monday Night Football and all this other stuff. But I do know that they just wanted to play football. They didn't want to. They did not care for the glitz and glamour of a lot of it. They loved the game and they just wanted to play. They didn't care about what came with it. And anybody who ever met my uncle knows that he didn't want to really cash in on being famous. He just wanted to be a football player, and that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I got to see him play, 30, 40 games on the tube before he retired. And it was clear to me that he really helped Butkus become the superstar that he was. Now, Butkus became a superstar first and foremost for the ferocity of his play. But he also made a lot of big plays because he freelanced around there. Well, guess who was doing all the dirty work and covering for Dick Butkus? It was Doug Buffon. And so, boy, oh boy, I mean, they made such a great tandem. A lot of people don't remember some of the other linebackers because they played a 4-3, but Ross Brubaker and some of the other guys, they were all good too. But it was Butkus and Buffon who were the Batman and Robin. And I think Robin is underselling what Doug did on the football field. He was great. And of course, Doug's broadcasting career was sensational too. Boy, oh boy, did he really know how to light up Bears fans.
And let me tell you, there were times where I would watch a football game with my Uncle Doug, and I've said this a million times before, but you don't really realize how lucky you are until you take a kind of a step back and you realize that how many people would love to be in your shoes in that situation. And, I'm just sitting on the couch watching a game with my uncle, and his biggest attribute was his cerebral approach to the game. He was fierce. He always said, I'm not the best athlete on the field, so I got to know where the ball is going before it's there, or I'm never going to have the speed to get there. So watching a game with him, he's calling out plays. He knows where the ball's going. He's watching the offense. We're watching it on TV. He's like, watch this pitch. There it is. He's like, watch this dive play. Boom. I'm like, incredible. He was such a cerebral linebacker, and I know that doesn't go along with what his persona was because he was Big Uncle Fuzzy, just big, rough, and tumble. But he was a very smart linebacker because he wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the biggest. So he had to have that real cerebral approach, and that's why the guy lasted 15 seasons in the NFL. His body was breaking down the last 3 or 4 years, but he knew where the ball was going to be. He knew exactly. He didn't have to rely on freak athleticism to get him through. He had to rely on his noggin, and that's why he was able to play for so long and play at a high level for so long. So I always really appreciated that part of his game. But
look what forecast says. That's what opposing teams do now.
Anytime the Bears are playing, like, hey, look, pitch left. hey, here comes that end round they love so much on 3rd and 1. Here it comes. They're calling that out now.
Well, maybe we should talk about that a little now because there were comments earlier about Nagy's play calling. Everybody is so down on his play calling, and I'd love to get your opinion on whether you think there's any hope that all of a sudden this guy can live up to that offensive genius guru label that we thought we were getting when he arrived here from Kansas City?
No. But no. Listen, I've been trying to, and not this year and probably not last year, but I'm running out of doubts to give him the benefit of. And so he came here to revolutionize the offense. It didn't happen. So, okay, maybe he's a great play caller. Oh, he's not. Maybe he can develop the talent. He can't. And maybe he can push guys that aren't maybe superstars. He can get the most out of them. He can't. So I need something else at this point. I'm not saying he needs to be fired right now. There just needs to be a complete shift, because if you had to say, what does Matt Nagy do really well? What would you say? I got to think about it.
He stares at that menu in a way unlike any other NFL coach in history. That's it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, what is Matt Nagy's redeeming quality as a head coach? I guess we used to say his players don't give up on him, or they always play to the end, or he seems to really, keep guys together because they went through a 6-game losing streak last year and he kept the team together and they were still able to make a playoff run. Okay. You still lost 6 in a row. So right. You're going to take responsibility for that. It's hard for me to think that this is going to change because he wants to be the play caller. He wants to be the offensive coordinator. He wants to be the head coach, and he wants to be the reason the Bears win. And I don't think that you can't have a head coach like that. I think that the head coach, and we've seen great teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Patriots, where these are defensive-minded guys, but they're really good head coaches, and they know how to delegate, and they know who's good at what they do. So they put guys in position to succeed, whether it's their offensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator. They are the leader of the men. They keep it together. They are the leader. They're overseeing all this. I don't want a guy that's calling plays, also the head coach. By the way, we've seen when Matt Nagy has his face buried in that Denny's menu of his, how he also loses track of time management sometimes because he's so worried about what play call they're going to make that he kind of blanks on when to use timeouts or overuse of the timeout sometimes, or maybe after using a timeout, there's a classic false start out of a timeout, or you take a timeout and that's the play you came up with. So I think that there's too many detriments here where if he just wanted to focus on being a head coach, okay, that's a great step. They tried it last year. Bill Lazor took over play calling. Right there, 4,000 Clover said it. The proof was in the pudding when Lazor took over play calling. He could have let Bill Lazor call plays, and he could have been the head coach, and he still would have got just as much credit as he would if he was calling plays, if they would win. So he needs, I don't know. I just don't think he knows how to be a head coach right now, because if he got let go, will he ever be a head coach again, Aldo?
I doubt it. I think he'd have to have a lot of success as some team's offensive coordinator. He definitely wouldn't be interviewed for a head coaching job for a few years. He needs some success in this league outside of Kansas City, his experience with Kansas City, which you really can't point to him and say that team was successful because he was calling plays. Well, he only called plays for about a half dozen games, and he called plays in that disastrous NFL playoff game. And so that to me should have been a sign to Ryan Pace that this guy was stubborn. And one of my biggest concerns about this season is that he's now got built-in excuses. So Justin Fields comes in, and if Justin Fields doesn't play at some type of Superman level, who's going to overcome the play calling errors by Matt Nagy, and Matt Nagy is going to say, we got a young quarterback, we're developing him, we're going to get this right, next year's going to, and a lot of people in the Bears organization, at least, are going to buy into that, and that's why he will coach the 2022 season. So I just feel like he had an opportunity to change their play calling to fit Trubisky and the talent that he had last year. And it wasn't until Steve Lazor took over, who then did that, who then worked with Trubisky to come up with game plans and play to Trubisky's strengths, and they won enough games to sneak into the playoffs. And then by the end of the season, when they lost that last regular season game and the playoffs game, well, it was pretty clear to a lot of people that who had taken over the play calling reins again. It was Matt Nagy. So we've got a potential problem coming if Justin Fields, hopefully Justin Fields will save Matt Nagy's job, so to speak, but I don't know about it. And we've got a question here from Steve who says, what realistic coaching replacement would you like to see at Chicago if Nagy was to lose? And the first name that comes to my mind is Byron Leftwich, the offensive coordinator for Bruce Arians. He's getting incredible experience and he's getting a lot done. I mean, yeah, he's loaded with talent. There's no doubt about it. But wasn't he the offensive coordinator during Jameis Winston's last season at Tampa Bay? I believe he was. And
yeah, because he came in with Arians, I believe.
Right. So while Winston threw 30 interceptions, he also threw for 30 touchdown passes, and that offense wasn't bad. So I think Byron Leftwich is on that list of candidates, and there's several other names too.
I know that the big name is always Eric Bieniemy, and it's always out there. But do you think that the Bears organization would take another Andy Reid disciple and bring him in as the head coach as the Bears? Because it's a very take the whoever the Kansas City offensive coordinator is didn't work with Nagy. Let's try this one. Do you think that they would? You think they would entertain that, or is that just too much of a emotional pain there?
I think there's too much emotional pain to go through that. I really do. And Chicago Hair Bear has a question. 2018 offense ranked 7th best Bears offense in history per Sports Mockery. Is that a fluke? Go ahead, take that softball, John, because I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. Well, and for a number of reasons. One, I think they still ran that very, very, very simplified offense with Trubisky in his second year. Jordan Howard was there running the ball a lot. Let's not forget that the 2018 defense was causing turnovers left and right and putting that offense in really good scoring position on a consistent basis. So there's a lot of things that go into that. So yeah, that's a fluke for a number of reasons. There was just a lot of contributing factors to that.
Yeah, well, being 7th in Bears history for offense.
Oh yeah,
isn't much.
Yeah. Right home about that. Like, what's the measuring stick here?
Exactly. Now, I do give him credit. In 2018, he comes out, the very first play he calls, it's the T formation, a salute to the great history of the Chicago Bears. He's got offensive linemen lined up at the wide receiver position. He's got all this creative stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, we did bring in an offensive guru genius. But as time went on and he was trying to force feed his offense into Mitch Trubisky's mouth, and Trubisky was just spitting it out, saying, that's not me. But they wouldn't listen to him. They would not give the young quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky, the respect of bringing him into the room and listening to what he wanted to do, what he wanted in the playbook, what he did best. They just wanted to do it their way. And it did not work. And so there are excellent questions here by Tony Brown. Do you think that Matt Nagy could ruin Justin Fields' development, John? What do you think?
I don't think he could ruin him. I think that he could stunt his growth in the short term. I think that truly transcendental talent can overcome what coaching they may have. I mean, Peyton Manning's first coach was the guy playoffs. I forget, Jim Mora. Yeah. So I mean, some of the great quarterbacks have overcome their coaching situations. A lot of them have overcome talent problems or personnel problems. Look at the guys that Brady had played with throughout his career. So I think that Justin Fields can be he can still be a great quarterback. Will Matt Nagy set him back a year? Mm-hmm. Maybe. But listen, they drafted this guy for a reason. They like what he can do. They think that he can fit into whatever system it is that they're trying to run. But he's just like a much, and I hate to simplify it like this because I don't really mean it like this. He's a much better Mitchell Trubisky, and where he has the athletic ability, he can throw on the run. Maybe he may process defenses way better. And if I had to guess right now, I'd say he probably does. He probably does read defenses 10 times better than Trubisky ever did. But so I don't think he can ruin him. It is frustrating that you may have to change a head coach on a young quarterback like that, and probably a offensive coordinator, quarterback coach. And that's why we stick to that notion that we think Matt Nagy will be around next year, because you don't want to Alex Smith this, where in his first 5 years, I believe he had like 4 or 5 different offensive coordinators, and you're trying a new system every single year. That can ruin a quarterback. If you're changing the system every year and you can't get comfortable in something, yeah, absolutely, that can ruin a quarterback. So I don't think Matt Nagy is toxic enough to derail Justin Fields' career, but it can have a negative impact. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think the worst thing that could happen to Justin Fields is not surrounding him with top flight talent, offensive linemen that can pass protect for him, and receivers that can get open and catch the ball. That's the biggest thing. As for him and Nagy, Justin Fields was asked about the relationship that he has with Matt Nagy, and has it changed this week, knowing that he's the starter as opposed to how it was prior to being the number one quarterback?
It's the same for me. I think me and Coach Nagy, we have a great relationship. So, one of the first things he told me when I got here was, we need to have the best relationship. So, I feel very comfortable going up to his office and talking to him whenever about anything. So, it's no different between, when I was a backup to now. So, yes.
It's great to hear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, Justin Fields is saying all the right thing. He's saying all the right things. I'm not worried. I ain't worried about Justin Fields. I'll be honest. I ain't worried about Justin Fields. Worried about the guy who's doing McDonald's commercials right now. That's who I'm worried about. So, I'm sure they have a good relationship. I'm sure he's a rookie quarterback. He's gonna try to have a good relationship with his coach. I mean, it's his first year in the NFL. What's he supposed to do? Nah, I ain't talking to that guy. No, so I'm sure they do have a good communication flow, and he is saying the right things. But we'll see as time progresses. We're gonna see if he's gonna be in a situation to succeed, because he needs his coach right now in the rookie year. We'll see if that actually happens.
Well, let's listen to Justin talk about his confidence level.
Yeah, I mean, I think my mindset, has been like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So there's no reason for you to be nervous about it. And, if it doesn't go your way, it doesn't go your way. But, in the past where I was nervous and it didn't go my way, I look back on the situation. I wish I would have just said, F it, and just went out there and, throw every ball the way I should have and stuff like that, rather than, second guess myself.
Was there a moment where it sort of flipped for you?
Yeah, I would say probably my junior year in high school is when I finally got confidence in myself and stuff like that. So I think that's where it kind of just the whole story changed.
I love that guy.
Right?
I love that guy. I love this guy. Oh my God, do I love Justin Fields? He's basically like, F it. He's just everything. Even like throwing out a curse word. It's just so even tone. So calm, so cool, so collected. The antithesis of myself. He's just everything is just so just cool and mellow. And he's like, I got this. I got it under control. Yeah, might throw an interception, whatever. I love this guy. He is our beacon of hope. He's our Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Chicago Bears. He is our only hope. So I love the way that he handles himself. I love the way that I think he understands that there's going to be roadblocks, and I don't think he's nervous about making those mistakes. Not holding his head low when he throws that pick or the fumble, or doesn't fumble and just lay there. He fumbled and he went and he slapped the ball out of the defender's hands and he actually got it back. So he's a competitor to in every definition of the word.
Yeah, it's interesting in listening to comments that he had about his confidence. It came up 3 or 4 questions, And every time that he was talking about, when it changed, when he faced adversity, blah, 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 he kept, I thought that he was going to say, yeah, at Ohio State, but he kept referring to his high school days. So it was during his high school days that he went through a transformation as an athlete, as a competitor, as a young man, where he took on this attitude. Hey, it is what it is. If I'm not going to worry about failing, because if that's going to impact my performance. So if I make a bad throw, those things happen. Just concentrate on the next play. It's such a mature championship athletic approach that he takes to his job, and that is one of the most impressive things about him, is just his personality. It really is cool.
I got to ask you this, because this is something that was in the back of my head, and I'm thinking about the quarterback situation in Chicago. Let's say, under some weird circumstance, that Justin Fields maybe struggles in the Cleveland game, maybe struggles against the Lions. They go 1-1, maybe they go 1-2 with Justin Fields, and he's shaky, but he's getting the job done. And all of a sudden, Andy Dalton's bone bruise is completely healed, and he is ready to go. He's raring to go. And the PR rep said, if healthy, Andy Dalton is the starter. I'm not saying Matt Nagy said that, because he didn't. He had to throw out a PR crony to go out there and say it. Mm-hmm. But what happens, and the impending backlash if they go 1-2 and all of a sudden they say, all right, Andy's healthy, he's going back in? Is that even a possibility in your mind?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what some of the folks in the chat are going to say about that. But I've got to say that, it's all about getting into the playoffs. You get into the playoffs, you have a chance to go deep. You have a chance maybe to get to the Super Bowl. You have a chance to maybe win the Super Bowl. I mean, that's what's most important here. First and foremost, Justin Fields' development is second. So if you're presenting to me a scenario where Fields has underperformed in the next 2 or 3 games, and the Bears now are 1-3 or 1-4, I think you got to bring Andy Dalton back in to see if you can get back in the playoff race. Now, it goes beyond, looking at stats when evaluating Justin Fields. You want to see certain particulars. Is he learning? Is he avoiding making mistakes for the second time? The worst thing that happened to Justin Fields in Sunday's game against the Bengals was that second false start penalty, because we've been told he doesn't make mistakes twice. He did twice in one quarter. So that wasn't good. But I saw enough in that game, the pass to Allen Robinson, the completions to Mooney, the escapability in the pocket, to say that even if he would have lost that game to the Bengals, I would have said, you got to play him next week, because I saw enough of his talent to progress on. But if the Bears lose the next 2 or 3 games and I'm not seeing those great throws to A-Rob and the escapability, and he just looks whatever, then yeah, you got to bring Andy Dalton in to get one last shot to get back into the playoff race.
I don't know if I agree, just because, one, the 2 false starts, how much is that on Fields? How much is that on Sam Mustafer? We're not sure. We don't know the cadence. They're not on the same page yet. Also, there's nothing to say. There's nothing saying that if Justin Fields loses to Cleveland, which is for all intents and purposes a better team, or if he goes out and loses to other teams that are predicted to win, who's to say Andy Dalton was going to win those games? The Bears have a tough stretch in the heart of their schedule. You look at, they could potentially go on another 6-game losing streak. So there's nothing to say that Andy Dalton would be the difference in those games. And so I don't want to see, and I saw this in the chat room, I don't really want to see a Fitzpatrick Tua situation where they got the old guy in and then they put the new guy in, and depending on the situation is how they put the quarterback in. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And then, as you can see, the schedule there is after the Lions, it's the Raiders, who look a lot better than I thought they were going to be. The Raiders, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Pittsburgh. You got to tell me that Andy Dalton's going to be the difference in those games? I don't know. So I would rather see Justin Fields develop through playing, develop through getting first team reps every week, developing a rapport with those receivers to say, to see that he is going to maximize his progression this season. Because you said it's all about, winning and getting to the playoffs in the Super Bowl. I don't know if the coaching staff thinks that, because why would you name your starter in May? Why would you name your starter in May without seeing either one of them? Without seeing either one of them play in the preseason or in training camp? You named Andy Dalton the starter, and you have no idea if he was better than Justin Fields at that point. But you named him. So I don't know if it's all about winning this season for Matt Nagy and that coaching staff. I just think he wants to be right. So I think that he might put Andy Dalton back in so that he can pick and choose when he puts Justin Fields back in. So I think that I personally would just say let Fields finish this season, get this season under his belt. Because if you look at that schedule, I said the Bears could maximize maybe a 9-8 record. And I'm still not sure about that. And maybe that gets them into that 7th spot or whatever. I thought maybe 9-8 was going to be where they were going to be at. And that's really where I thought they could max it out.
What do you what about this scenario that the Chicago Hair Bear brings up? So what if Fields lights it up, the Bears are good, and they win the next 3-4 games easily? Now, remember, even today, Matt Nagy said that when healthy, Andy Dalton is a starter. So what happens under this scenario? Fields lights it up, and they win the next 3-4 games, and then Dalton is ready to go.
Well, I think we need to see the contract that that Matt Nagy handed to Andy Dalton when he promised him to be the starter. Are there clauses in there where he's not the starter? I need to see what the what this promise really entailed. Because if it is about winning and your rookie quarterback is winning, what the hell are you doing putting the other guy back in then? Mm-hmm. Because obviously he's progressing enough, he's getting the job done. And you're going to just kill the momentum of winning 3 or 4 games? Yep. No, absolutely not. I don't care who you are. He'd get run out of town. As Greg Braggs would say, we riot. because if Justin Fields is winning that many games and there's no reason to take him out, you can't just put Andy Dalton back in because you think that's the right thing to do, or you think that you got to have a control over that. No, I would absolutely love that situation. I don't think it's the most likely situation, but I would love that situation if he's able to rip off some wins there and get things accomplished.
One of the interesting things about the schedule, and this is being discussed in the chat room, is, when I looked at the schedule, I said, well, they're going to lose against the Cleveland Browns. I mean, people are picking the Browns to go to the Super Bowl. They got the defense that's ferocious and so forth. I don't think the Browns are nearly as scary as I was led to believe coming into the season. As you and our guest, Jared, talked about in the first half, that defense has been giving up points. They have not. No, they when you play Kansas City Chiefs, you're going to give up some points. But even against the Texans, they weren't that outstanding. And so I will not at all be surprised if the Bears come out of Cleveland with a win. And some of those other teams, like for instance, Pittsburgh, I think that's another great possibility for the Bears to win on the road in Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger not playing anywhere near his Hall of Fame level, with potential injury to their pass rushing star, Watt. He will probably be playing by then, but you don't know. So, with football, things can change dramatically week to week because of injuries, because of who knows what. So the schedule to me doesn't concern me as much as what the Chicago Bears themselves are doing on the field of play. And I saw enough against that Bengals game to go to Cleveland with some expectations that they could come out of there with a nice victory.
Yeah, and to your point, I have them beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they beat the Steelers. They beat the Steelers in the last 3 matchups, I believe. They haven't lost to them since 2005. So they beat them with Mike Glennon and John Fox in 2017. They were able to beat the Steelers on a long run of a treat cone. I think that game went to overtime. But I think that by that point, the Steelers might be a little worn down, and I just think I'll be at that game in Pittsburgh, and so that's gonna be a fun experience. But anyway, I agree with you to a point where it depends more on where the Bears are at. But they're not getting any help from that schedule, because those are all really good teams they got to face in the heart of it, and a lot of it. And listen, we're talking a lot about the offense, and we're talking a lot about the quarterback and how everything depends on that, but we failed to talk about how we still need to see more consistency out of the defense as well. We saw a nice bounce back from the defense last week. We saw reflections of that old Bears defense, but I think that there's going to be some more tests there, and I don't know if it's just because it was the Bengals. So we're definitely going to see against the Browns whether or not this defense is actually back, because what we saw in week 1 was certainly not what we wanted to see. Week 2 was much better. Now this is a good barometer.
What is one of the big storylines for me this week is the return of Eddie Goldman. That should help this defensive line even more. The defensive line played well against the Bengals. Insert Goldman into this incredible Cleveland Browns offensive line that we're going to face, and now it really helps Quinn and Mack continue their ascension as we saw last week. You know, I mean, after week 1, we had those two guys we started to pull out coffins for their careers with the Bears, but they came back with a super strong game against the Bengals. With Eddie Goldman back, it's really going to help. It's going to help against the run game and that strong Cleveland Browns rushing attack. My only concern is Jeremiah Atoshu, who was in on a lot of plays when they both had Quinn and Mack on the same side of the defensive line. Atoshu was on the other side. That, to me, is going to be a bit of a loss if indeed he does not play. He did not practice today on Wednesday, so hopefully, I think it's a toe that he's got. Hopefully he'll be healed because he is necessary, I think. But maybe we'll get an opportunity to see the young guy, Travis Gibson, go in there, who looked really good in preseason. So the Bears defense is going to present a lot of cool storylines this week, and we'll talk about that on Sunday on Bear Football. And just so everybody knows, we are going to get a little bit of a later start on Sunday because I'm going to be in Cleveland, and so I want to have access to my gear to get onto the air immediately. I've got like about a 15-20 minute walk, according to Google, from the stadium to the hotel. So as soon as I walk back to the hotel, fire up the equipment, get organized, John, Tyler, and myself will be on hand to talk about the Bears win in Cleveland.
That's right. And real quick, they also get Mario Edwards back this week, as a lot of the guys in the chat room are saying. So that could be a good shot in the arm to the defense, a good little energy burst there. Guy who was out the first two weeks. So that'll be interesting to see how he works his way back into the defensive scheme. One thing I do want to talk about, and this is kind of off topic, but still on topic, before we head out of here, Aldo, Devin Hester. He is now eligible for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and for some reason is a very polarizing subject amongst people who like to banter back and forth about football. I think that us and probably everybody in the chat room and everybody that's listening to this podcast would agree that Devin Hester is a Hall of Famer, and he owns enough records to get him in there. And so I believe he has the most ever punt returns as far as career goes. He has the most kickoff and punt return touchdowns career. He has 19 punt return touchdowns, 14 punt return touchdowns in a season, 4. This guy literally changed the game. And if you watched the Bears in the late 2000s, whether it was 2007, 8, 9, he literally changed the game for a lot of those Bears games because they had offenses that weren't very good. But Devin Hester, every time, the electricity, that feeling. I remember I was still relatively young when Devin Hester came onto the scene, and you just went, wow, holy crap. We got, not only was the defense dominant, but it was a 3 and out, and you're like, we get to see Devin Hester now. We get to see Devin Hester come on the field. We get to see Devin Hester with the ball. And regardless of what you're talking about with touchdowns, people had to scheme away from kicking him the ball. He became Barry Bonds, where they wouldn't pitch to him. They wouldn't kick to him anymore. They'd have to kick it out of bounds. Sometimes they'd shank it away. They had to always change the way they kicked because of Devin Hester. He is a Hall of Famer in my book, not just because of the records that he holds, but because of how he changed the game, how he impacted the game, and not to mention culturally, it was so good for the game to know that dude, any second that he has the ball, it can be absolute magic, and he showed it in the first kick of the Super Bowl against the Colts, where he took it back for a touchdown, where I thought the Bears were going to win the Super Bowl. I saw Devin Hester, and it was the most electrifying feeling in the world. There's no doubt about it. This guy is a Hall of Famer, and I honestly don't see how you could really argue otherwise. He's the best to ever do it. He is literally the best at that position to ever do it. So I don't know how that guy's not in the Hall of Fame then. What's your case against it?
The only case against it is that I don't believe there's been a kick returner make the Hall of Fame. And so he would be breaking some ground. The whole Hall of Fame thing is so weird because the criteria is always so hazy from voter to voter to voter. But the one thing I always hear more than anything else is that he impacted the game. Well, like you just eloquently said, John, he impacted the game. When defenses or special teams are kicking away from you, when you're breaking records, when you're the talk of the NFL because of the plays that you did on Sunday, that to me is automatic induction into the Hall of Fame. I think that the only question is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? And I can't answer that question because I haven't studied the 122 nominees. That's how many they are for the season, I believe. And so, I'd like to be fair to everybody else and say, no, maybe Devin has to wait a year because I got 9 guys ahead of him. Now, I don't think I would have 9 guys ahead of him, but I haven't studied the list, so I don't know. What do you think? You think he's a shoo-in to be first ballot?
Oh, I don't think he's a shoo-in by any stretch, because to have that for me personally, yes. But I think as far as they like you said, this would be a groundbreaking induction, and I don't know if they want to do that on the first ballot. Whenever I haven't looked at like you said the other 122 people on the ballot, but I don't think that they would want to have such a groundbreaking induction on the first ballot. I think he may have to wait 1, 2, 3, 4 years. And I hope it's not. But Devin Hester, you are ridiculous. And he was the excitement around the Chicago Bears for so many years. And so, if you can put a damn punter in the Hall of Fame, you can put the guy who actually scored points in the Hall of Fame too. So so if you're thinking about who changed the game, who was the best at that position, who routinely impacted the game, it's him. It's Devin Hester. He was an all-around electric football player. He is the best to ever do it. Absolutely. Hall of Fame for me, first ballot. But if we're talking about the politics of the Hall of Fame induction, hell, how long did they make Chris Carter wait? It all depends on who's calling the shots in those little meetings they have where no one's allowed to watch.
Now, you have to have a really eloquent person like a Dan Pompei who got Brian Urlacher in faster than anyone expected. First ballot for Urlacher. You got to have somebody like Dan Pompei really making that strong case. And I hope that he does, because Hester's definitely worthy of going into the first ballot based on, everything we've been talking about today.
Send Lovie Smith in there. Say, hey, this guy was my offense for 5 years.
There you go.
Our offense was our kick return game. Here it is. So it was just that feeling, and maybe I'm talking too much from a fan's point of view, but it's just knowing when he ran onto the field, like, this could be 7. I've never had that feeling with anyone else. You kind of had it with Cordero Patterson, where you think this guy has just the skills. He's a freak athlete. He could take it to the house. But nothing ever like what I had with Devin Hester, where if it was a punt return, I was like, oh God, please just let him catch it. Let this land in bounds. Let this land in bounds because there's a good chance this is going to the house. But 20 return touchdowns, Aldo, 14 punts, 5 kickoffs, and 1 missed field goal. I can never get enough of watching Devin Hester highlights. I will continue to watch those to the day I die because they are the most exciting highlights you can watch. Because I think I saw it in the chat room where it's just like you watch it and you're like, I can't believe he can do that with 11 other guys on the field trying to tackle him. There are 11 guys trying to tackle him, and he just glides right past them like he's on ice skates, and everyone else is just slipping around. It was Eli Manning. What the hell was anyway? I'm sorry that really derailed me there. But yeah, and probably he's got 2 rings, whatever. But yeah, I think that he is ultimately deserving of that honor, and I think that he's one of those guys where you think of Chicago Bears legends, and he's in there. And like you think of those big names, Devin Hester. I still have my Super Bowl jersey with the Super Bowl insignia on there, stitched Devin Hester jersey. Listen, I was brought up in a family that loved defense. You love the linebackers, you love the D linemen, you love the guy that get in there and beat you up. But I had one of the first authentic jerseys I bought was a Devin Hester jersey because I loved watching him play so much. And I hope he was my favorite player for years. Even though they had Urlacher and Briggs and, Wally Ogunle and then Mike Brown and all those other boys. I loved Devin Hester. He was my favorite player. And so I hope that he gets in there sooner rather than later.
There you go. I think it's time to wrap things up. You want to take it from here?
Sure, absolutely. Aldo, I appreciate you filling in today, and obviously thoughts and prayers are still with Alyssa and her family. We hope that she everything is going well there and she can get back to us soon. But hope you enjoyed this episode. Please check out DeBear Debate. That was a new show that we launched a couple weeks ago. Aldo, he's the referee between myself and Tyler Ellis. Very fast-paced. 10 quick topics about the Bears. We have 30 seconds to get our point across. If you think that I can get a lot in 55 seconds on this show, you can see what we get in 30 seconds on that show. So it is high pace, high energy, great show. Love to do it. As Aldo said, Bear football directly after not this week, but after the game, we'll give you our reactions about the Bears, whether a win or a loss. We got a lot of raw emotion there, and then a lot of great programming as far as Dan and Aldo, bare their souls. We got Mike North. We got Greg Gabriel. A lot of great Bears programming throughout the season. So every day there's something new. Barfly Tailgate, always a fun time. Joe Mandel and the Fantasy Football Goon, all those guys. We got Bears programming and football programming for you basically every single day. There's always fresh content here. You're going to want to check out all of it. So I appreciate every one of you, whether, like I always say, whether it's your first time or your 55th time, I appreciate each and every one of you listening to this show. But that will do it for this edition of Buffone 55. Appreciate you tuning in. Same time, same place. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Take care.